To look at conditions here in the Sandhills, Eric, things are looking pretty darn good for this time of the year.
Sure. Well, it's just about as pretty as having out here just in general. But yeah, actually, I think for the most part, they had enough moisture earlier in the year. The pastures have done fairly well. I wish I could say the same thing about other parts of the state. Some areas, particularly parts of Panhandle. We've had kind of a rough last 2-3 months out there, severe drought in some places. And we've also been drying out in other parts of the state. Some parts of north central, northeastern Nebraska have been pretty dry the last 30 to 45 days, and particularly kind of down in parts of southeastern Nebraska near the Kansas border. We've really seen things go south pretty quickly here the last month or so.
Of course, the drought monitor continues to reflect that as that comes out weekly, and people taking a look at that. Were you expecting some of this dryness to happen a little bit later in the growing season as we looked at the weather patterns setting up what was going to be the 2024 growing season?
It wasn't a total shock. I mean, I think there was a hope that we could get through August before we started drying out. Sometimes that transition from El Nino to neutral or El Nino into La Nina can be a little problematic for our part of the country in terms of drought. So we definitely have seen some areas of the state with some flash drought development. Thankfully, it wasn't maybe as widespread as some other years. I mean, certainly not like 2022 or 2012, but in some places it's been kind of rough.
Well, it's foolish to paintbrush things and say the whole state of Nebraska is this way or that way, but in general, Eric, things have been unseasonably cooler here for the month of August and got a nice relief for a lot of people.
No, this is very true. That's actually probably one thing that has helped keep things from really going sideways with regard to drought, particularly in parts of southeastern Nebraska. We have been relatively cool here for the last 2 weeks. Now, that was after a stretch of time where it was warmer. But I think looking forward, though, we probably are going to have some heat here coming up the next several days. And then, I think September right now looks warmer than average, which again has been kind of typical for the last decade or so. The CPC is showing it being relatively warm and dry for the fall as a whole. So they are actually concerned about drought basically encroaching the entire state as we head into this winter.
Well, it's time for the Nebraska State Fair coming up this weekend, so the heat has to return there for a few days. That's seasonal.
Oh, of course, yeah. I think that's like God's law that it has to be really hot, either fair or Husker Harvest Days or both.
Or both, absolutely. Okay, so let's look at kind of the fall outlook for a harvest as you look out to the 30 days. How are things shaping up, moisture as well as temperatures?
Well, the CPC is showing warmer and dry for September and October. Most of the indicators I would look at would probably kind of show that that's probably fairly accurate. Now, I think there is going to be chances that we will get at least some routine frontal passages that will have the chances of bringing in some precipitation, potentially even some heavier precipitation across portions of central and eastern Nebraska as we head into September. So I don't think we're going to be just bone dry, but I do think that we probably will not have a significant frequency of precipitation. And we might have a couple cooler spells, but I think the risk of an early frost is fairly low this year. And we probably will be generally above average as we head into the first part of October. So I think the outlook for harvest is mostly pretty good right now. Hopefully so.
Well, there are patterns. Obviously, when it comes to weather, there are patterns of how we talk about weather. And during the growing season, it is, will we get rain? Will we get rain? What are these things going to look like? But it seems about when the combines do hit the field and we get into the winter months, it turns to what's the next growing season going to look like? You mentioned La Nina versus El Nino. Are people starting to look at that? And what might it look long-term weather for the next year?
Well, we are currently in neutral, oceanic atmospheric neutral conditions. I think the expectation is that we will be in a weaker La Nina by the time we get into the winter. But there's actually about a 50-50 shot right now. They'll be back in neutral conditions as we head into next spring and summer. So La Nina summers can be problematic in our region of the country. It's certainly not a guarantee. We've had La Nina summers that have been very, very good across the Central Plains and Western Corn Belt. But I would say the fact that we would be in neutral would probably give us at least a better chance of getting routine precipitation in the spring. But one issue that we will have going in, if we do have a very, very dry fall and have drought present across the state, for some places it'll be 5 years in a row we going into winter in drought. And if we do in the winter drought, that means that we're going to need a wet spring to make sure we get those soils recharged. Else we're really going to be setting up for another difficult growing season next year.